Stanford University.
All right, well, welcome to Stanford CS193P, Spring of 2016, lecture number 16. And today is all demo. I'm going to do a big demo on CloudKit to show you how that works. I'm also going to take a brief little thing at the beginning to show you about notifications, that little radio station thing. We talked about how you can find out about size changes happening, and I'm going to show you how that works. And that's pretty much it for today. It's kind of all demo today. Coming up Friday, we're not doing sections anymore. People weren't that interested in sections this quarter. That's fine. And then next week, I'm going to be covering maps, some more segues, and then just some miscellaneous topics. Not quite sure yet what I'm going to do there. All right. So let's dive right into this demo. Going to launch Xcode here. We're going to make a new project. Going to be our standard stuff here. So what I'm going to do is an app that is a question asking app. So it lets you author questions with answers, and then they're out on the cloud in iCloud, and people can answer the questions. Okay, and then it keeps track of how many answers people had and all that stuff. So today we're just going to kind of do the start of it, which is we'll have some UI to make the question, and we'll upload the questions to the cloud, and then we'll have another view controller which shows a list of all the questions that you can choose on, and you can click some UI to make a new question or delete old questions. So we're going to be able to do all kinds of iCloud stuff there. Deleting, we're going to do subscriptions with push notifications, all that stuff. Okay, so we're going to call this app Pollster. I'm also going to change my unique thing here just to be something different. How about teacher instead of instructor? So Pollster, because you could use it to poll, ask people questions, get polls. No core data. It's going to be an iPhone only application. We're just going to have a couple table views is all. We'll put it in our standard location here. So here we are in a Pollster, and I'm going to kind of clear out my storyboard to start. So let's take this little view controller that it comes with. Let's delete its code right here. Delete. Move that to the trash. Let's go ahead and put these little guys into a little supporting files thing again. Supporting files. Notice I'm going to leave app delegate out of the supporting files because, of course, we're going to do push notifications. That involves our app delegate, so it's not really a supporting file. It's kind of a main thing this time. And back in the storyboard, we can just get rid of this view controller. We don't need it at all. Okay. Now, I also have some other files here that are going to be supporting files for this demo. So I'm going to drag those in right here. In fact, I'm going to put them in supporting files, copy them in. Let's take a quick look at those. All right, so one is I just wanted all my structs with, my constants in there to be pre-typed in, so I don't have to type them in all the time. And basically, these constants are going to be for the push, or actually for the local notification, the radio station stuff. This is going to be the name of our radio station and the key in the dictionary. And then these are the names of the entities and attributes that I'm going to create in CloudKit. Okay, so we're doing Q&A. Here are questions and answers, and here's a response to a Q&A, and then we got questions, answers, we got a chosen answer, and then we've got a reference Q&A. So we got all that. And then I added this little was created by this user. It's a bool on a CK record, a CloudKit record, that just says whether this record was created by the currently logged in iCloud user. Okay, so that's that. Then over here, I have this nice class here, Q&A table view controller. It has nothing to do with iCloud. It's just a table view controller that shows a question. Okay, a question and as many answers as you want. Okay, notice that it inherits from text table view controller. That's a generic view controller that just shows a table view where all the rows are editable text. Okay, that's all it is. It doesn't know anything about questions and answers. It's just rows of editable text, nothing more. We're not even going to be accessing this API. We're going to be focusing totally at this MVC's level. And here's the public API for that. Super simple. Okay, it's got this var Q&A, which is basically its model, which is of type Q&A. That's this struct. And it's a question, which is a string, and answers, which are strings. Okay, so it couldn't be any simpler. It's the simplest possible data structure for a Q&A. It's got these other vars here. Is just whether you're asking the question or answering the question. That's because if you're asking the question, you can edit the question, right? You're asking it, so you can add more answers and stuff like that. Whereas if you're answering the question, you can only choose an answer. Okay, and then if you do choose an answer, here's the answer. So you can just get the answer as a string. Okay. It might be a nil because maybe they haven't answered yet. So that's it. That's the entire public API of this, and this is the only API we're going to use in our cloud one. And our cloud one is just going to be a subclass of this because it's going to be a Q&A, but it's a Q&A that's stored in the cloud. Okay? So let's go ahead and create that subclass of this guy. So I'm just going to do File, New. Okay? CocoaTouch class. It's going to be a subclass of our Q&A table view controller. Okay? And we're going to call it Cloud Q&A table view controller. Okay? Because it's basically just a Q&A table view controller that stores its question and answer on the cloud. All right, so here it is. Let's go ahead and blast all this just so you can clearly see what new stuff we're adding here. So there's our superclass being a Q&A table view controller. Let's, of course, go to our storyboard and drag out a table view controller. Okay, and we're going to set its identity to be one of these cloud Q&A table view controllers. What's interesting about the Q&A table view controller is you don't need any prototype cells at all. It creates its prototype cells in code. And so if you're interested in how to do that for your final project or whatever, you could take a look at that Q&A table view controller. Actually, you would want to look at the text table view controller, the superclass one, for how you might have a table view that creates its cells that way instead of using prototypes. And you can see why it doesn't use prototypes because it's such a simple cell. It just has a text view in there. That's it. The entire cell is just a text view, nothing more. So it didn't really need a prototype to do that, and it makes it easier for subclassers too. They don't have to worry about that. All right, so we've got our thing here. Let's also make sure that it's the initial view controller right here. So we have the arrow coming in. And in fact, I'm going to put this thing into a navigation controller. Okay, that way I can have titles on things and stuff like that. Okay, so this is our UI to start. And we're going to start by just having a question appear in this cloud table view controller right here. So I'm going to go to the cloud table view controller. Where did I put that? Right here. I'm going to take that out of supporting files actually. So I'm going to go to the cloud table view controller, and I'm just going to, in its view did load, I'm just going to give it a question. Okay, so super view did load, just so you can see how this thing works. So Q&A equals a Q&A, and here's the constructor for it. It takes a question, you know, what is your favorite color or something like that, and the answer is blue, black, red, okay, however many we want. Okay, so let's just run and see what that looks like. We'll go ahead and run, we'll run this on the device actually. Let's try that. Okay, so this is an iPad, but it's running here in iPhone compatibility mode. So it's showing an iPad. So here you go. What is your favorite color? It shows it to you. You can scroll up and down, and you can choose an answer. Okay. Now that's because we're in answering mode. Okay. But if we go back to our code over here and say asking equals true. Okay, and then run. You'll get very similar UI. The only difference being we can edit it. We can add more answers. We can move our answers around. Okay. So here we go. Notice we can reposition them. Okay, so if we want one answer to be after another, we could add another answer here, maybe white, okay, something like that. We can delete an answer just by backspacing out of it, gets rid of it. Okay, we can change the question too if we wanted. Okay, so everyone understand what this Q&A table view controller we just inherited from does? That's it, that's all it does. Okay, now it knows nothing about the cloud, and what we're going to do is make this Q&A thing here be stored on the cloud. All right, so now we're back in the cloud Q&A table view controller, and we want to make this thing work with the cloud. So it's going to have a different model than its superclass. Its superclass's model is a question and answer, which is good. But our model here is going to be a CK record, okay, a CloudKit record. So I'm going to call this thing CK Q&A. Okay, we'll call it that because it's CloudKit Q&A. Actually, maybe we'll even call it CloudKit Q&A record, so we're clear that it's a record in CloudKit. And it's going to be a CK record, is all. And of course, if anyone sets it, just like with almost all of our MVCs, when someone sets our model to something, if it's public and we allow people to set it, when it's set it, we want to react to that. And what we want to do when someone sets our record is call our superclass, set up our superclass's model, right? That Q&A, we're going to get the question and answer out of the record and set it up in our superclass. So we'll just let the question equal the records. And remember that we access the records just using dictionary-like notation. So I'm going to use one of those constants that I had there, attribute.question. Okay, that's over here, remember, in the CloudKit extensions. So cloud attribute question is this key. So that's going to be a key into my Q&A entity right here. Okay, and notice how I'm not going and creating this schema anywhere first. I'm just writing my code on the fly. It's just going to automatically create these things in the database for me as I go. Now we also know that the CK Q&A record, when you use this dictionary notation, it always returns this type that you have to cast, right? It returns a CK record type or something like that. So I'm going to have to say as a string, because I know the question is a string. And by the way, if that's nil, I'm just going to use an empty string as my question. Okay, so that way my question is never nil here. And then similar with the answers, that's the Q&A record using the attribute for the answers, except for that's not a string, it's an array of strings. And if that's nil, then we'll use an empty array. So now I've gotten my question and my answers out of this record that was given to me. Okay, this is did set on my public API right here. So now I'm going to have my superclass Q&A equal a Q&A. Okay, where the question is that question and the answers is that answers. Okay. Now, what about the asking? Okay, what about whether I'm asking or not? Okay, this thing of whether it's going to be editable or not. Well, that depends on whether this record they just gave me was created by me. If it was created by me, then I'm clearly editing it. If it was created by someone else, then I'm just choosing it. So I'm just going to say that that is CK Q&A record dot was created. What did it call it? Was created by this user. Okay? So I'm just using that thing I showed you in that little extension over here. Okay? So we got this record. Now, a couple of problems here. Okay? One thing is right here. Use of undeclared type CK record. Why is that? Import CloudKit. Okay? And CloudKit is a different framework. If you want to use it in any of your files, you have to import CloudKit. Okay? Still have an error here. What's this? Oh, the old no initializers. Why? Because this is never initialized. Okay, well, this is kind of an interesting case because I could just, for example, make this be an optional. Then it would start out nil. That's great. But really, I don't want any external person to be giving me an empty record, a nil record. So I'm going to do something kind of interesting here that you can do when you want your public API to be non-optional, but you still are going to allow internally the thing to be optional or nil. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this public one to be optional, non-optional rather, and I'm going to turn it into a get and set, okay, a computed one, where it's going to be implementing its get and set by using a private var underbar CKQ and a record, and this one's going to be optional. Okay, it's going to do all the same things that it did. It's just going to be optional. And in the get and set here, the set is just going to set the CKQ and a record private one to be the new value. Okay, this is always going to be non-optional. That's going to be great. That's going to set it there. And here, if someone tries to get the CKQ and a record, okay, I'm going to check to see if my private one is nil. And if it is, I'm going to set my private one to just be a blank one. Okay, and here I'm going to use this entity Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to create a blank one, and then I can return underbar CKQ&A unwrapped, because I know I always at least create it. So this is kind of a little tricky thing here to make sure that it's always this way. And another good thing about this is, sorry, you had a question?
Could you use a lazy initializer?
Yeah, so the question is, can I use a lazy initializer here? Like, could I have said CKQ and record equals CK record, whatever, or even a lazy one? I wouldn't even have to be lazy. The reason I'm not doing that is the old problem where did set doesn't get called with the initializer, right? And I want did set to always get called, and this is going to cause did set to always get called. So that's a little bit of a trick there. Okay? All right, so we've got this all set up for our public API here. What do we want to do next? Well, let's go ahead and change our view did load. Instead of setting our superclass thing, let's just test and make sure we're working. So I'm going to set my CKQ and a record equal to an empty record, just as a test here. Okay, so we're just going to do that. I just want to see if this is working. So let's run. And it should come up an empty question, but it should be editable because I created this CK record, right? So here it is. It's empty, empty question. I could type here. I could say something, like when. I'll just say when. Okay, answers today, maybe never. Okay, tomorrow. Okay, so I've created this question. Now, as I edit all this stuff, of course, none of this is going on the cloud yet. And in fact, none of it's even going into the CK record. It's all just being held in that Q&A. Okay? So the next step we need to do is to have this thing write to the cloud. Now, when to write to the cloud is the question here. Okay? We could add a button, maybe a bar button item up there that says save to cloud. Okay? Or just save or something like that. So that would be one way of it. But I'm actually kind of a fan of UIs that the user doesn't have to take extra steps unnecessarily. So wouldn't it be cool if we just saved this to the cloud every time someone finishes editing one of these fields? In other words, as soon as the keyboard goes away, any of these times, boom, we'll just save whatever we got to the cloud. Now, we might also want another UI which is publish so that it shows it to other users. But for now, users can see things in progress, okay? Just because we're starting out our app. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have it every time that this first responder gets taken away from a text field, I'm going to have it update the cloud. So how can we find out when a first responder is taken away from a text view? We're going to use the text view's delegate. It's almost identical to the text field delegate that we talked about before. And our superclasses, okay, the Q&A table view controller right here, its superclass is the text table view controller. And the text table view controller already, not surprisingly, is a UI text view delegate. Okay, so it's already receiving UI text view delegate messages whenever any of its text views are edited. Okay, so that's great. So all we need to do here is implement a UI text view delegate. So I'm going to implement the one which is did end editing. Okay, text view did end editing. Oops, not did change. Did end editing. This one. Okay, and we'll let my superclass, he might well be doing something there, so we'll let him do his thing. And now what I'm going to do is just update the cloud. So I'm going to have some method iCloud update. Okay, and it's complaining here because I overrode this, so I need to say override. Okay, so this iCloud update is the thing that's going to take our Q&A, ship it up to the iCloud, to the CloudKit database up there. So let's go ahead and do that. That's private func iCloud update. Okay, so what do we need to do to write this thing to the cloud? It's actually really simple. The first thing we're going to do is get the stuff out of our Q&A into our record. Then we're going to save our record. Okay, so let's do the first part of that first, which is let's take our CK Q&A record and set, for example, its question. And we'll set its question equal to be the Q&A question. Okay, so we're just grabbing it out of our superclasses thing. And similarly here, the Q&A for the answers equals Q&A answers. One thing, I probably don't want to be polluting the cloud with empty question and answers. So I'm going to put a little if around this just to say if my Q&A question is empty, and I'm also going to make sure that my answers, Q&A answers, isn't empty either. Okay, so in other words, if I don't have an empty question or answer, then I'll go ahead and do this. Okay, and so now that I've updated this record, I need to save it to the cloud. So I'm going to actually have a different function for that, iCloud save record, I'm going to call it. I'm going to pass my CK Q&A record along. Okay, we're going to have this little function that's going to save things to the cloud. Okay, so private func iCloud save record takes a record to save, which is a CK record. Okay, now what's this guy going to do? This one also surprisingly straightforward, as you saw from the slides. One thing is anytime we're going to save something into the cloud, we need a database to work with. So I'm going to say private let the database equal CK container, remember? Container, whoops, CK container, default container, public. So we're going to put this in the public cloud because I want everyone to see everyone else's questions. Okay? So if I put it in the private database, I'd only be able to see my own question. So this way I'm going to see everybody's. Okay, so we got that. So I'm going to ask the database here just to save this record. Okay, the record to save. And here's the completion handler right here. And in this completions handler, we have the saved record, basically, which should be the same thing, or nil, and the error. Okay, and this is asynchronous. Okay, this closure is going to be called sometime later when this thing is saved. Now, this is a demo, so I don't have time for us to go and analyze every realistic error that could happen every single time we do something with the cloud, but I'm going to show you a few of them just so you kind of get an idea how to handle errors, what kind of errors would come along. So let's look at an interesting error that might happen when you're saving a record, okay? So this error code equals ck error code dot server record changed. Okay, don't forget .raw value on the end because we're looking at this as an int right here. Okay, so what is this error? This error means we tried to save a record, but that record had already been saved newer by someone else. Okay, so now I've got old data that I'm trying to write on top of somebody who wrote newer data. Maybe it was one of my other devices. Maybe it's even me. Maybe I'm writing so fast I saved 3 or 4 records in a row. Okay, they all got queued up, and one of them got through the network faster than the other. Could be. This kind of approach of writing things and just checking when you write them to see if it's newer is called optimistic locking. Okay, it's basically you don't check first before you write. You just try to write, and if it's newer, you fail. Okay, so save record, which is this convenience method on database, really has no way to make it overwrite, have an older thing overwrite a newer thing. It's not even clear that's what I'd want here. Probably do want the newer thing to be what gets through. If I did want to do overwriting of newer things, then I can use that whole operation-based thing I was telling you about in the slides. Much more complicated than this convenience method, but it can be done. But anyway, if a server record change happens, there's really nothing we can do or would want to do, so we could just ignore this. Okay, we just assume that the newer one is what we wanted. Okay, what other kind of stuff could happen if we're writing here? How about let's say if our error is not nil, in other words, we got some other kind of error, let's check to see if that error maybe has a retry in there for us. Okay, something we can go and retry what we're doing. Okay, now maybe why does that happen? Network latency, something like that, some network problem that might recover with a little bit of time, that kind of thing. So how do we do this? So I'm just going to I'm going to call another function to handle this. I'm going to call it retry after error. It's going to take the error, whatever happened, and I'm just going to give it a selector to call to retry. Okay, and the selector here is going to be, in this case, since we're saving record, I'm going to have iCloud update. Okay, this thing up here that updates, try to do this again. Okay, now let's go ahead and put this retry in there, and we'll see what some of these errors that are. So it's a private func retry after error, takes an error, which is an NS error, and then it takes with selector. We'll have a nice local name for that, and this is a selector. Okay, so we have errors here. So what is this error? It says selector refers to a method that is not exposed to Objective-C. That's iCloud. Now why is this iCloud update not exposed to Objective-C? Well, it's because it's private. Okay, this is a class that inherits from NSObject, so that's not the problem. The problem is that we have a private method here. So we can expose it either by making it not private or just saying objc. That means, hey, expose this to the Objective-C runtime. Okay, that make sense? All right, here it's now saying the call to the method iCloud update requires explicit self. Okay, so that's that it knows in ourself because we happen to be in a closure right here. Okay, all references to things in ourselves have to be explicit. Okay, so that's good. All right, now retry after error. How are we going to retry after error? Well, if we can't get that retry interval magic out of the error structure, then we can't do it. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to say if we can let the retry interval equal the error's user info. Okay, so user info is this dictionary that comes with an error that gives you kind of interesting info. And the thing we want is ck error retry after key. Okay, so that should be an NS time interval. Okay, so if we're able to get that retry interval, then hey, let's go ahead and retry. Okay, and how are we going to retry here? Well, I'm just going to do an NS timer, scheduled timer with time interval. I want this one. Okay, let's go ahead and make this have different lines here so you can see a little better what we're doing with the timer. Okay, so the time interval here is that retry interval that we got out of the error. Okay, the target is going to be ourself. Okay, the selector is this selector we passed on here. Okay, user info, we don't have any. We're just retrying, so we don't have any extra data, and it does not repeat. Okay. Now, the problem here we got to be careful of, we're calling retry after error in this closure, which is executing off the main thread. Okay, so we cannot do NS timers on other threads. So we need to dispatch async to the main queue, dispatch _ get main queue. We'll do this like that. Okay, you got that? Cool. All right, so that's just a couple of the errors that we could do. If it succeeds, we actually don't need to do anything. It saved it. We're happy. We just move on. Okay. All right, so let's try and run this. Let's just see if it happens. Let's see if it can save this thing to the database. So I'm going to run. All right, here we go. Uh-oh, crashed. Now, why would it crash? Anytime it crashes, the first place I'm always going to look is my console down here. So let's go take a look at the console and see if it has a reason that it crashed. And it does have a reason, and the reason is this application is missing the required entitlement for iCloud services. So this is that thing I was telling you about where we have to go enable iCloud, right? Because iCloud's a server technology, things are going to have to be created on the server side for this app, etc. So they don't want to create that for every app, only for apps that are actually going to use it. So how do we do that? We go up here, okay, to our inspect our project settings here, and we go to capabilities, and we click iCloud here. Okay, so you have to make sure you pick a team, okay, because it needs to know who you are so we can set up this iCloud stuff for you, okay, in your account, your developer account up there. So here we got iCloud enabled. We're going to pick CloudKit as this service that we want. Okay, we can pick these other ones as well, but we're going to focus on CloudKit today. And we'll be looking at the dashboard in a little bit. Actually, let's go take a look at our dashboard now, for that matter. Okay, when you want your dashboard, of course, you have to log in. Here we are. Nothing has been created yet, and that's because we haven't done any iCloud where we have tried to create any entities. Okay? All right. So now that we've done that, now let's go back and run and do that and actually create some entities. So let's get our code back up here so you can see that. And run. All right. So here we go. Blank question and answer. Let's go ahead and put a question and answer here again. Let's try, how about, what is your favorite team? Okay, and we'll say maybe the Sharks. Whoops. Sharks. Or maybe the Warriors. Or maybe it's the Giants. Okay, it's a lot of teams to choose from in the Bay Area. All right, so hopefully this is creating on the server, because remember, every time we went to a new field, it should be writing something up to the cloud. So let's go back and take a look at our dashboard here. So let's reload. Here it is. Look at that. Q&A entity got created with answers and questions, so that's great. So that's the entity side of it. And we can actually look at the data, not just the entity, but the data that's been stored by going down here to this default zone. Now we'll notice when we try to look in here for things, it says records can't be shown because there's no index on the record ID field. So you can't look at things that aren't indexed. And so let me show you where that is. If you go back here, you see metadata indexes, record ID not being indexed. Same thing created by. Okay, and in fact, I want both of those to be searchable. I need created by so I know which QAs and A's were created by me, and I want record ID so I can go find all the ones out there. And you can actually see, here I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'll show you something real quick here. All right, so I've changed this to have these indexes. Now I can go to the default zone. It can find things, and sure enough, what is your favorite team? Sharks and Warriors. I guess we didn't save the Giants one here. When we reload, we'll see that. One thing about the cost, I wanted to show you the costs thing, which is down here. If you look at, where is that? Usage. Okay, if you look at usage right here, it's going to show you how much you're using, how many active users you have, how many requests per second, how much transfer you're doing of large files, how much storage you're using, all that stuff. And these things, if you go above these lines, start costing you money. See these red lines, okay, the limits, usage. So I'm way, way below everything, obviously. But, you know, so this is basically how you get charged for it. Okay? That good? All right, so we've got our nice database. It's being loaded up. It's excellent. Okay, the next thing we're going to do in our UI here is we are going to have another view controller that has a list of all the the Q&As that are in the database, okay, that we can choose from and take a look at the Q&As. Okay, so it's just going to be a simple table view with a list of the Q&As. All right, so how are we going to do that? We're going to have to create a new MVC, so let's go ahead and do that. Go File, New. Okay, go Touch. This one's just going to be a regular UI table view controller. I'm going to call it my All Q&As table view controller, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to be a table view controller that shows all my Q&As in it. Okay, and we'll put it in the same place as usual here. Here's all Q&As. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of this stuff. Okay, so as always, what's going to be the model of our new MVC? Well, it shows all Q&As, so that's going to be my model, all the Q&As. And that's just going to be an array of CK record. Okay, and of course, when that changes, if someone changes that array of records, then I'm going to have the table view reload its data. Hopefully you're all familiar with that after smash tag experiences. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So how do we get all these Q&As? Import CloudKit. How do we get them all? Well, in my view, let's do it in view will appear. Okay, when I know I'm going to come on screen. I'm going to call some method to fetch all Q&As. Okay, and that's going to go out to CloudKit and find them all. So that's a private method called fetch all Q&As. Oops. Okay, and how's this thing going to work? Well, this is going to turn out to be very, very simple. Of course, we need our database here, so let's get that. CK container.default container. Again, we're looking in the public database there. Right? We have a database. So fetching all the Q&As really just requires doing a CK query. Remember that from the slide, CK query. So for CK query, we need a predicate. Okay? And since I'm getting all of the Q&As, every single one, I'm not searching for anything, I'm going to use the predicate true predicate. Okay, this is a special predicate that means get them all. Okay, remember in core data we have nil means get them all, but here you can't have predicate be nil, so true predicate means get them all. Okay, next we can just create the query itself. That's a CK query, okay, and we'll get its initializer here. So it just wants to know what kind of things are you querying. It's just like when you're doing NSFetch requests in core data, you can only query one kind of thing at a time, one entity at a time. So here we're going to have cloud.entity.Q&A, because that's what we're searching for, these Q&A entities, and here's the predicate we're going to use. Now, one thing I forgot to show you in the slides, very important, is sorting. Just like in NSFetch request, you can do this here as well. I can say query.sort descriptors, and I can specify how I want to sort this query that I'm doing. Okay, so I'll have a sort. We'll sort this by the name of by the question name. Okay, so key is cloud.attribute.question, and we'll have it be ascending. Okay, and of course this is an array, just like it is with fetch request. You can search last name first, then by first name, etc. Okay, so that's it. We've created our query, how we want to sort it, what the predicate is. Now we just ask the database to perform this query. Okay, and the query is query. Now this in zone with ID, I told you that there's these zones that are like sub areas of databases. By dividing your database into zone, you can make queries a lot more efficient. You can see why already. If I only am searching a small part of my database, it makes it a lot faster to search. Here we're not using zones, okay? So we're just putting nil as our zone. But if you have a huge data set, you can look into the zones feature. Okay, so here's my closure that when the results come back sometime later. This is the array of records that it found with that query. And here's the error, if any, that it found. Okay? Now, what am I going to do with these records that came back? Well, if the records is not nil, in other words, if it found any records, then I just need to set my all Q&As equal to those records. Right? But be careful. This is not happening on the main queue. So if we're going to do this, which is going to cause this reload data to happen, means we have to dispatch async onto the main queue. Okay, don't forget that dispatching back to the main queue when you're going to do UI stuff as a response. Okay, so that's it. Okay, super easy. The only thing we left to do in this table view controller is our UI table view data source. So let's mark UI table view data source. Okay, we don't have any sections in this table. Okay, it's just all one big section. The number of rows. Okay, let's do the number of rows. That's just the number of things in our array, all Q and A's dot count. That's how many rows we have, obviously. And then we also obviously need cell for row and index path. Cell for row and index path. So cell for row and index path, which we had, oh here, let's make it a little wider here. Okay, cell for row and index path. I'm going to get the cell by using the table views DQ, whoops, views DQ. With identifier. So what identifier should we use? Let's say a Q and A cell. So let's go back to our storyboard and have the cells of this. Oh, first of all, let's put our table view in here. How about that? So here's a table view. This is going to be in between these two, right? This one is going to be the root view controller, and we are going to be segueing from this one to this one, which shows them. Let's make sure we set our identity of this to be our new all Q&As table here. Here's our cells right here. So these cells, we're going to have them be basic style because they just have the question. We're just going to put the question so they don't have any subtitle. They don't need any custom stuff. And the identifier is the Q and A cell. Okay. Hey, while we're here, let's go ahead and do the segues for this. It's really simple. We're going to segue from these rows. Okay. Anytime someone clicks on these rows, we're going to segue over to here and do a show segue. And we also want to be able to create new questions as well, right? We're going to click on questions we got, but we want to create new ones. So I'm going to do that with some UI in here. I'm going to create a bar button item right here. And I'll use the standard plus one, which is add, okay, because we're going to add something. This is plus. And then it's going to control drag from here and make that show. Okay, so this is going to do a segue. And in fact, they can do the same segue because they pretty much do the same thing. They show a Q&A. It's just one of them shows whatever row was selected, and the other one creates a new one. So we'll call this show Q&A. That's a good name for that. And we'll call this one also show Q&A. Now, in our prepare for segue, we're going to have to do a little bit different thing in those two cases, but that's basically what we're doing. Okay, so let's go back to our code here. All Q&As. So here's our cell, index path there. Let's just have our cell's text label. Text equal what? All Q&As sub index path.row. That's giving me the CK record. Now out of that CK record, I've got to get the cloud.attribute.question, because that's what I'm going to show inside that row. And of course, we know that comes back as a CK record value, so I have to say as a string. Okay. And then we will return the cell. Okay, also super simple. Okay, makes sense? And now let's prepare for segue. So that's mark or navigation. Prepare for segue. This is also going to be very straightforward. First, we're going to see if the identifier is our show Q&A. If it is, let's get that MVC. So we'll say if we can let the cloud Q&A, CloudKit Q&A table view controller equal our segue's destination view controller as a cloud Q&A table view controller. Okay, so we're segueing to one of those, so that better be on the other end. If that's true, then we need the cell. If we're segueing from a row, we need the cell, so let's try that. So if we can let cell equal the sender as a UI table view cell, okay, hopefully you guys are used to doing this, again, from your homework assignment. And then we can let the index path equal the table views method cell for, or sorry, index path for cell, this cell. Okay, so here is kind of a one-liner that gets the index path of the row that was chosen. And if that works, then we can just say that the cloud Q&A, oops, I guess I called it CK Q&A TVC, will set its public API, which is CK Q&A record, okay, equal to all Q&As sub index path dot row, right? That's the record that was chosen there, obviously. If we can't get the cell, if we can't get the table view cell, that must be because we pressed the plus button, right? Because the plus button's not a row in a table. So in that case, I'm just going to set the CK Q&A record equal to a new record, because that's what we want. We're creating a new thing here, so that's cloud.entity.Q&A. Okay, everyone understand that prepare for segue? Okay, so let's do that. All right, so here it's showing all the ones, and look, it's even showing what is your favorite team that we already had from before. I'm going to touch on that, and oh, it's not showing it to us. Okay, why is it not showing it to us? When we click on this, it shows a blank one. Why does it show a blank one? Because over here in our cloud table view controller, look what we do in our view did load. Oh no, we always set the record to be nil. So let's get rid of that and allow the segue to actually set it. That's a tricky little bug. Okay, so now when we click on this, we get to see the question out of the database. Okay, and we can hit plus and create a new one. Maybe like, what is your favorite Stanford class? Okay, and we'll have some answers here. How about CS 193P? Or if not that, how about iOS development? Okay, that's a great class too. And how about the iPhone and iPad programming course? Okay, you can pick whatever Stanford class you like, okay? So that, when we go back now, it's going to ask for all those Q&As. And it's going to show that one as well. Okay, so that you can see very little code we had to write here to have it so that we're creating these things and editing them. What about deleting them? Okay, what if I had said, I don't want this one anymore. I want to delete it. What would be really cool is if I could just swipe on this to delete. You've seen that in table views, right, where you can swipe to delete. Okay, how do we do swipe to delete? We've never covered that in class. This is a great opportunity to do that. So if you want to do swipe to delete, you have to implement two of your UI table view data source methods. One is you have to answer whether a row can be deleted or not. Okay, that one is called can edit row at index path. Okay, can edit row at index path. Now in our case, as long as we created this, then we can allow it to delete it. But if we didn't create it, we can't. So here I'm going to return all Q&As at the index path dot row was created by this user. So if it was created by this user, then I'll allow you to delete it. Okay? The other method you need is the thing that actually commits the delete, that does the delete. That's called commit editing style. Okay? Commit editing style right here, table view commit editing style. And so here, there's actually two editing styles that you can have. One is deleting and one is inserting. Well, we do our inserting with that plus, so we don't need the inserting style there. We only want deleting. So I'm going to say if the editing style equals .delete. Okay, so if the person wants to delete my row or whatever, then all I need to do is delete it from the table, but I also want to delete it from the database as well, right? Both of those. So what's that look like? So let's say if we're deleting, then I'm going to let the record to delete equal my all Q&As index path.row. Okay. Then I'm going to say to the database, please delete this record with an ID, and the ID is the record's record ID. Okay. Completion handler here to handle errors. This is the deleted record if it happened, or error if it didn't. And so handle errors. I'm again short on time, so I'm not going to do that. And in either case, even if it didn't, even if it failed to delete, I'm still going to go ahead and delete it out of all Q&As. So to do that, I just said all Q&As remove at index the index path.row. Okay, so it's just going to delete it from the thing. Now, hopefully this was successful and it won't come back later, but it's going to delete it here. So let's take a look at this. All right, so we created both of these, so I can swipe to delete, right? Either one that I wanted. So let's delete this one, and it's gone. Okay, and we can make sure it actually deleted in the database by going away and coming back, because it reloads when it does that. It didn't come back. So it actually deleted that from the database. We could also go over and look in our database right here in our default zone, and we can see we only have what is your favorite team. We could reload just to be 100% sure. Default zone. Sure enough, we only have what is favorite team. It deleted it. Okay? All right, so that's great. All right. One bad thing about our UI, though, is you see this nice little table view. If I'm just sitting here and someone else creates something, it doesn't show me. So let's go over here on iPhone Simulator here, and I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to see what happens. Okay, so it's showing what is your favorite team. So I'll create a new one here. I'll say, what is your favorite color? That's kind of our favorite one. Red and blue and black. Okay? Now I've created this, but it's not showing up over here, right? And it's not showing up there because I'm not subscribing to that change. I'm not watching the database. Now if I go away from this and come back, it is going to show it, because when we view will appear, we reload from the database. But it's really annoying for the user to always have to go away and come back to see the latest thing. So we need to do a subscription. Okay? Perfect opportunity to do a subscription. So let's do that. So how do we do the subscription? Pretty simple. It's 2 parts, really, 3 parts to doing it. The first one is we need to actually subscribe. So let's do the subscription first. I'll even put this in a little mark subscription place here. One thing is we need to have an ID for our subscription. So I'm going to say subscription ID. And this is just an English language description of what we're going to subscribe to. And so I'm going to say we're going to get all Q&A creations and deletions. And this has got to uniquely identify this subscription in the database. And I think that pretty uniquely identifies what we're doing here. So let me create a private func here called iCloud subscribe to Q&As. Okay, and this thing is going to do the subscription. So when you do a subscription, you need a predicate that says what you're looking for, okay, what you're trying to find out when it changes. So again, we're going to use pretty much the same one we used before, which is true predicate, yeah, because we are looking for any additions or deletions of Q&A, not just the ones we've created or not just ones with certain questions, but any of them. So that's why we're using same predicate. And then we just create the subscription. Okay, CK subscription. And It's this one right here. And let's go ahead and put this on separate lines, as I am wont to do when there are lots of arguments, so you can see what's going on. Okay, so the record type is what kind of things we're watching. And of course, here we are watching entity Q&A. That's what we're looking for searches for. Predicate is our predicate. Okay. Subscription ID is our subscription ID. I'm putting self in there just to emphasize that it's my subscription ID. Okay. And then the subscription options are what kind of changes are we looking for. So we want ones that fire when one's created, and we also want to find out when one's deleted, because we're showing a list of the Q&As, so we don't care if one gets updated, although we might care if it's updated because maybe it changed the question and now the list should change there. But I'm just going to do creation and deletion here to show you that. Now, one thing here that I'm not going to do, but that you can do here, is there is a notification info argument, or a var, on subscription that you can use to say what happens when the push notification comes, when this changes. Does it put up an alert? Does it put a badge? Does it increase the badge, right, on your app icon? Okay, does it play a sound? Bloop, things arrive. Okay, you can set that here. I'm going to have none of those things happening. I'm just going to, behind the scenes, fix up the table. I'm not going to put any alerts up or whatever, but I just want to let you know you can do that here. Okay, so we got that, so let's just go to our database and tell it to save this subscription. Okay, save our subscription with our completion handler right here. Okay. Here is the saved subscription if it succeeded, and here's an error if not. I'm going to take a second to show you an error here because there's a common one that happens. Error.code equals ck error code dot server rejected request. Okay? And what happens here sometimes is if this subscription by its unique name is already on the server, then it will reject your request. Okay? So this usually means that you ran your program, you were developing, this code ran, and then you hit stop in the debugger. Okay? It's killed your app. And then you ran it again, and oh, it tried to do it, it's still there. Okay, the subscriptions live forever until you actually remove them. Okay? So quitting your app has no effect on the subscriptions. So this is one where usually you'll ignore that server rejected request, figuring, oh, somehow this thing got already put in there. That's fine, we'll just use it. Okay, it'll continue to work just fine. Okay, and else, if there's some error, other kind of error, report that error or whatever you feel like you need to do. Okay, so that's it. That's all that's necessary to get iCloud to start, sending us push notifications when any of these creations and deletions happen to any Q&A. Now, one thing is we're subscribing here. We also probably want to unsubscribe. And when would we want to do those two things? So I'm going to have an unsubscribe as well. Unsubscribe. And when do we want to do this? Probably when view will appear, we want to subscribe. And when view disappears, we unsubscribe. Okay? Because it's no use sending these push notifications. We're not even on screen. Okay? Especially since when we reappear, we reload ourselves anyway. Okay, so there's no reason to do that. So when view will appear right here, I'm going to say iCloud subscribe to Q&As. And in view did disappear, I'm going to say iCloud unsubscribe. Okay? Now, iCloud unsubscribe. What do we need to do to unsubscribe? Very easy. I'm just going to say to my database, please delete the subscription with ID, my subscription ID. Okay? Completion handler to handle errors here. This is the subscription that we tried to delete. This is an error. We will not handle errors because we're running out of time. Handle it. Okay, so we'll just delete those descriptions there, and that's it. Okay, so now we've set up our table here to get those updates, but of course we have to be able to receive push notifications for this to work. Okay, and we do that over in our app delegate. So let's go back to our app delegate right here and look at that code as covered in lecture. One, in did finish launching with options, we need to register for the kinds of notifications we're willing to present to our user. Okay? And the user actually can choose in settings, the general settings, whether they want alerts or badges or sounds or whatever, but we're going to explain here which ones we think we want to give them. Okay, so we do that by just creating the settings, but that's a UI user notification settings. And for the types that we want. And this can be like alerts, badges, sounds, okay? And I'll go ahead and register for all of them, although I'm not going to use any of them because that subscription.notification info, remember that? I didn't put that line in, so it's not going to do any of these things, but I'm going to tell the user, hey, I want to do all these things, because maybe some of my other push notifications want to do it or whatever. But I wouldn't sign up for these actually if you're not going to use them, because it just creates unnecessary stuff for your user. All right, so there's the settings. So now I have to register those settings. So I just say application.register user notification settings, those settings. And now I need to turn on push notifications. Okay, register for remote notifications. Okay, push notifications are called remote notifications. Okay, boom. So now I've turned on push notifications. They're going to start coming, okay, from CloudKit or whatever else ones that I set up. So now I have to handle them when they arrive. And I do that with this thing called remote notification, did receive remote notification. Okay, remote notification came in. What am I going to do with it? Well, I'm going to assume that it's a CloudKit one here. I don't have any other ones that I'm expecting, so that should be fine. If I had other ones, I have to do more code here. But I'm just going to say if I can, actually I don't even, if I'm going to let CKQN, short for CloudKit query notification, equals CK query notification. CK query notification. Okay, that's not completing because import CloudKit. Okay, so I'm going to create a query notification. The only way to create one of these things is to hand the dictionary that comes with the push notification off to this constructor, okay, this initializer. So I'm going to give it that. One thing that's unfortunate about that is that it wants that to be a dictionary where strings are the keys and NS objects are the values instead of NS objects as the keys, any object as the value. Okay, so you just have to do this. All right, so I've got my query notification that came from CloudKit. Awesome. Now I need to hand it out to all my view controllers that might be interested. And as we said in lecture, we're going to do this with the radio station. Okay, so let's create a radio station. Notification equal NS notification. All right, we're going to use this one right here. Again, I will help you out a little bit, see what's going on. All right, so name is the name of the radio station, and as I told you in that CloudKit extensions, I created something for that, so I call that CloudKit notifications dot notification, what did I call it? So I have to go back and look here, supporting files, extension, CloudKit notification, notification received. That's the name of my radio station, notification received. Notification received. Okay, so that's the name. Any object, this object is the sender. That's self. That's my app delegate. Doesn't really matter too much because I'm not going to look at it in the other end. And then the user info, I need to pass this CKQN on. So I'm going to create a little dictionary on the fly here. And the key is going to be my CloudKit notifications dot notification key. And the value is going to be that CKQN. Okay? So this is the thing I'm going to pass out onto, this is received. This is the thing I'm going to pass out on my radio station. So let's go ahead and broadcast it by saying NS notification center, default center, post this notification. That means broadcast on this radio station. Okay, now everybody who is signed up to listen is going to get this push notification forwarded on to them. Okay, so now let's go back and sign up over here to get that. And I'm going to do it in my subscribe. When I subscribe to the Q&As, I'm going to then go and sign up for that radio station so I can hear the results. And to do that, I need that little cookie. So private var, we'll call it CloudKit Observer. It's going to be an NS Object Protocol optional right there. Okay, I'm going to say CloudKit Observer equals, and I'm just going to ask the notification center if I can please listen to that radio station by saying add observer for name. It's this one. Okay, again, I'd love that there was a nice little single key to do that for me. So here's the radio station I want to listen to, which is CloudKit notifications dot notification received. That's the name of the radio station. Any object, I don't care. And if anybody sends me that, I'm going to listen. Okay, I could put the app delegate here, but I'm going to say anybody. And I'm going to do some UI here, so I better say ns operation queue.main queue. Okay, send me this on the main queue. And then here's the block. Okay, this argument is the notification that's coming along in the radio station, and I need to get the CKQN out of the user info in that notification. Okay, so what does that look like? Actually, I'm going to do all that in a different method. I'm going to have iCloud handle subscription notification, and I'm just going to pass CKQN onto that. So the CKQN here, we can say if we can let CKQN equal the notifications user info, which might be nil. I have to be careful about that. And I'm going to get the CloudKit notification key here, notification key. Okay, and that better be a CK query notification, or I don't know what to do with it. Okay, so if I can get that out of the little radio station broadcast, then I'm going to handle it. Okay, so how do I handle it? Private func this thing. Okay, and oh, there, we have a syntax error right here. This should be notification key. Notification key. So handling it is pretty simple, actually. First, when handling it, I'm going to make sure that this is for me. I'm going to look at the subscription. Oh, sorry. CKQN is a CK query notification. Okay, I'm going to make sure that this thing is for me, to make sure its subscription ID equals my subscription ID. Because remember, you might have lots of different view controllers getting push notifications from CloudKit, okay, doing different things. So here I want to make sure it's this one that I'm getting the answer back from. All right, so now that I have that, I'm just going to get the record that changed. Okay, the record ID that changed is ckqn.recordID. Okay, hopefully some record changed, deleted or created here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I can also find out what changed. So I can say, what is the reason that I got this notification? And one reason could be because a record was created. Another reason might be because a record was deleted. Okay? Otherwise, I don't care, because I only handle creations and deletions. Right? Let's do deletion first. It's a pretty easy one. Okay, so what happens if something was deleted? Well, I'm just going to dispatch async back to the main queue and remove it from my all QAs thing. So dispatch _get main queue. And I'm just going to say self.allQNAs equals self.allQNAs. And I'm just going to filter out any records where the $0.record_ID does not equal this record ID that was just deleted. Okay, so filter goes through all the things in the array. $0 is each thing in the array. I'm going to get the record ID of the thing that's in there. And if it's not equal to the record ID, then I'm going to filter it. If it is equal to record ID, then it's not going to get through the filter. Everybody got that? Super simple. Created slightly more difficult, although only slightly. So here, I'm going to check if I have a record, if the record, okay, first of all, we have the record ID here. To show this record in our table, we actually need the record, not the record ID. By the way, it is possible in our subscription to have said, hey, when you give this thing, also give me the question. In other words, you can ask for certain fields so that I don't have to do what I'm doing right now, which is I'm going back to my database and fetching that record. Database, fetch record with ID, which is kind of unfortunate that I have this record ID and I'm having to turn around and go back and fetch it. So you don't have to do that if you, in your subscription, say, just give me that right off the bat. Okay, and you can specify which fields you want. Okay, so here's the record coming back, hopefully not nil, and here's the error. Okay, so if the record is not nil, I got it back. Now I need to add it to my Q&As. Now, a slight complication here is when I put it in my list of Q&As, I obviously need to sort it because my list of Q&As was sorted by the database, but now I'm getting this one record that I have to put in the list, so I have to do sorting. So I'll show you a little bit how to do sorting in here. So I'm going to dispatch async back to the main queue. Okay, and on here I'm going to say self.all Q&As, okay, get ready for this, equals the self.all Q&As we got so far plus this record. Okay, so now this is the new thing with it appended onto the end, but the end is no good, so I'm going to sort. Okay, and when I sort is going to pass me $0 and $1, and I have to say if $0 is less than or greater than $1, and that's how it's going to sort everything. So let's go ahead and return here $0, which is a record, a CK record. So I'm going to get the cloud.attribute.question because I'm comparing the questions. Question, right? But of course I have to do it as a string, and I'm going to see if that's less than $1, cloud.attribute.question, also as a string. Okay, so this is nice, but this is really messy code. It looks absolutely awful here. Wouldn't it be cool if, like we had in core data, where we could have the subclass of NSManaged object and we could just use vars for these things? Well, we can't quite do that, but watch this little trick. I'm going to go back to my supporting files, this CloudKit extensions thing that I did over here, okay? And I'm going to do this, extension to CK record, var question is a string, okay? I'm going to return self sub cloud.attribute.question as a string. And in fact, I want this to not be an optional, so I'm going to say question mark empty. So you see I've added a var question to CK record that returns this thing. So now back in my other code over here, all this gunk just becomes dot question. Okay, get rid of all this, dot question. Okay, looks a lot nicer, doesn't it? Okay, and in fact we could use this dot question other places, like down here in self row at index path we do the same big mess right here, dot question. Okay, now, okay, all your attributes would have to be unique across all of your entities, or you'd have to start putting the entity name somehow in this name of this var, but you know, something to consider. Cleans up your code quite a bit. All right, everyone make sense what I did right there? By the way, if this record couldn't be fetched, then I'm kind of like, what the heck am I going to do here? So I might want to do something here like go reload my whole table, you know, do a fetch all Q&As, call fetch, I have to dispatch async and all that, but I'm not going to do it because we're out of time. But I might want to react to this error somehow here. Okay? All right, so let's go back and let's run it on iPhone. And we'll run it on our device. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new one here. Let's try how do you greet people? And the answer is you say hello, or maybe you say aloha. And you can see, as soon as I typed enough to get this thing to upload, it appeared here because it got notified via the push notification. And in fact, I can look at it. Let's see, how do you greet people? Here we got hello. The aloha has not even been uploaded yet, so let's go ahead and hit the aloha, and we get the aloha. Okay, and same thing with delete. If we go back here and say, well, we don't want this to greet people, we'll hit delete, and it deletes it on our other one. We don't have to wait back and forth. Okay, I will see you next time.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.